Hey guys, I'm RNG Gamer. I play all my games randomly. Welcome to Beating the Backlog, where I go over the games that were picked for me to play randomly. It's been a while since I've done one of these, but I have 6 games for you, ranging from like JRPGs through some investigation games, there's some snowboarding stuff, even some shoot 'em ups. If any of that sounds interesting to you, sit back and enjoy the video. First up, we have a visual novel / investigation game done by Spike Chunsoft. They're the ones that do the Danganronpa series, which I really like. This one's gotten kind of hard to find here in the West, so I imported it from Europe for like half as much. And that game is AI: The Somnium Files. And this is the first one in the series. There's actually a sequel that came out not that long ago. So like anything that's good or awesome, it starts with a murder. You're basically like this elite investigator with this AI eyeball. I mean, yeah, it's a Japanese game. You have an AI, an artificial intelligence eyeball. Over time, this like extremely complex and interwoven story begins to form. The game, it deals with like dreams and alternate realities and, you know, the Yakuza and internet influencers and a bunch of other stuff. You know, all the basic stuff you'd run into in your daily goings about. You know, like when you run into the Yakuza and alternate realities. Mostly the gameplay centers around just like reading dialogue. It is kind of like a visual novel. Luckily, most of it's voice acted, which is nice. But really the only gameplay centers around inspecting these crime scenes for clues. You basically control the AI in your dreams. Your eyeball manifests itself as this like sexy anime girl, and you need to unlock hidden memories to help out with the investigation. Most of the investigation centers around doing these like nonsensical puzzle solving elements that they kind of like play off as, you know, oh, it's a dream world, so it doesn't need to make sense. You're basically just like rubbing object A against object B, hoping something happens. But it's usually under like this really strict time limit that you kind of have to manipulate to advance the story. Because it's like a dreamlike world and it doesn't make sense, as I mentioned, you know, it involves a lot of trial and error. And that's not necessarily a lot of fun, but sometimes when you do the wrong thing, something humorous can happen, and that's kind of one of the big draws of the game. Obviously, the art style is like super anime. It's done well. But some of the, I don't know, the character design feels, for lack of a better word, just uninspired. You know, for every really lame character though, there's a really awesome one, and on top of that, they're all voice acted like extremely well. I'm really happy with the voice acting in this game, and it really helped move me through all that dialogue I had to read. There's also a pretty decent soundtrack to accompany all this that gets really good at points, and most of the time it just kind of fades into the background, but it adds some like good urgency to the story and keeps things moving. It's hard to like maintain energy when you're just reading a bunch of words on a screen, but like with some like pumping music, you know, that helps out a lot. Most of the characters are pretty likable from the onset, like I said, and you feel invested in them. The game starts off kind of dark from the beginning, but about 10 hours in, it gets really dark, which is a nice change of pace against the, you know, general goofiness that you deal with at the beginning of the game. There are several plot twists in this game. I'm just gonna tell you, like any investigation game, there's gonna be a bunch of plot twists. And the main one, I kind of like cracked in the first 30 minutes of the game, or so I thought I did, but turns out that's just one of a multitude of twists and turns that happen along the way. So I'm not as smart as I thought I was. There's also some sort of weird like eye symbolism in this game. The main character has a fake eye, which like I said is his AI partner or companion. The killer removes the victim's eyes. The female lead is named Iris, which is like a part of the eye. I don't know, that's kind of interesting, but I feel like it's a little heavy-handed. But I mean, I guess you have to have a theme for a game. You have to have a theme for a game, right? You can't just like throw a bunch of crap together. And this one, they picked eyeballs. I mean, I guess that's as good as anything else. Some things that drive me crazy about the game are that it's full of just like stupid dialogue, as most, you know, kind of anime-based games are, especially visual novels. They have to like fill in the time, and I feel like they feel like they're paid per word. So it gets overly verbose. At times it's really like painful to listen to. Other times it's really witty and funny, you know? It can be a bit of a mixed bag. I don't know what's going on, but there's this like repeated joke about porno mags all throughout the game, and it ends up being like the solution to every tight spot that the main character gets into. I don't know, maybe it was funny the first like 4 times it happened, but in like the 6th time arc where a porno mag is the trick to getting past the Secret Service, like, I don't know, it kind of loses its luster. There's only so many porno magazine jokes that any grown 40-year-old man can appreciate. And that number is apparently 6. It took me about 25 hours to see all of the endings in this game, and I did see all of the endings. I like how they get dark and sinister on some ends and silly on some other ends. And they do get really silly. You know, for example, the game's theme song is titled The Invincible Rainbow Arrow. So there's some levity to the whole situation. There are a multitude of endings, but a lot of them have some real pacing issues, you know, as most visual novels tend to do. It'll show the same flashback 2 or 3 times, like over the course of 10 minutes, just because it doesn't trust you to remember what's happening. There are these branching paths that you have to go down, and like it'll shut you off. It won't let you finish the story, and then you have to go down another branching path to uncover multiple timelines and other puzzles to give you access to go back to the first timeline. So you're jumping around between these multiple timelines, and knowing what's like canon to the story is a little challenging. Like, I don't know even now which story is the correct story. There are like 10 different endings to this game. So I guess you just decide for yourself like which one you want to be the canon ending. Or I guess when I play AI The Somnium Files Part 2, it'll let me know which one is the canon ending. Imagine a murder mystery where no matter who you guessed was the killer, you were right. You know, there's so many branches and endings that like almost every suspect has a path where they end up being the killer. So I know that's kind of a spoiler, but it's kind of not a spoiler. Like, it's just, there's a million different endings. That being said, let me give you my final thoughts. So I 100% completed AI The Somnium Files. I got the Platinum Trophy, I got all the endings, I did everything there was to do in the game. And when all was said and done, I thought it was a really good game. It was an 8 out of 10, which is a great game. Yeah, some of the endings were like dumb, some were really cool, some of them were contrived and far-fetched, but in general I thought it was a really good experience, and I would recommend you complete this game. I'm excited to play the second one. I wish at times it was a little more silly or it was more serious. It kind of straddles that line where it's like tries to be really serious and dark, and at other times it's like the silliest crap you've ever seen in your life with like dance numbers and Minecraft-based worlds and things like that. I think it needs to go hard one way or the other. Like running down the middle, it just lost a little bit of that sparkle that it needed. If you're enjoying the content thus far and you're not tired of me yet, consider subscribing to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. And while you're down there hitting the subscribe button, like the video and leave me a comment. I answer like every one of them. Up next, we have a game that's a favorite of Metal Jesus and a lot of the people on his YouTube channel, and I've been picking them up over the years, all the games in the series that is, based on his recommendation. And this is a gold star game, meaning I had to beat 10 other games to earn a gold star, and then I spent that gold star to pick this game for myself to play. So it wasn't entirely random, I did choose it. And I'm glad to share it with you because I think it's like the best snowboarding game I've ever played. And it's SSX Tricky. So this game has like exhibition modes, but it also has career modes with tons of characters and tons of unlockables, and you can upgrade your character over time, which you're gonna have to do to succeed, believe me. But the game plays exactly like you would think. You race down various slopes while trying to pull off like over-the-top tricks and beat your opponents to the finish line. You do each course 3 times in a row, and each time it gets progressively harder, and if you finish in the top 3, you get to move on to the next track. What really makes the game stand out though is like the insanity of the tracks. Like they're way over the top with tons of ramps and jumps and rails you can grind and elevators and fans that shoot you up into the air, everything you'd want in like a crazy snowboarding sort of playground. The presentation looks really good for a PS2 game, and the character design's really interesting and pretty funny. I like them a lot. Everything looks really crisp, and this game runs at a great frame rate. I don't remember like the frame rate really dropping much. I don't know if it's like 30 frames a second, but it feels like it's 60 frames. So if it is running at 30, man, they pulled off some black magic there. The music's really decent, but a lot of it consists of like EDM music or like silly, almost like barnyard music, and it can get a little repetitive. But some of the tracks, of course, they have like Run DMC's Tricky on there. That's really fun whenever you get to hear that. And one of the things I really love about this game is that kind of your success is dependent on finding these shortcuts in the level, and there are tons of them. They're really interesting. Some of them are like very obvious, some of them are really out of the way, and that's really what's kind of fun, is exploring the levels and finding these different routes to the finish line. Some of the things that really annoy me about this game, and I mentioned this earlier, that you have to finish each race like 3 times and it gets progressively harder each time. It's really annoying to come like first on race 1 and 2 and then like crash on race 3 and have to do all 3 races again. I found out though if you crash you can actually just restart that race from the beginning, but I'd already put like 10 hours into the game by that point, so I was frustrated with it. But after I figured that out, it made the game a lot easier, so I'd recommend that. If you're doing really well and you just like start blowing it towards the end of the race, just restart that section of the race and you'll be fine. Also, there's really like no way to grind for upgrades for your character. You just have to get good. Yeah, you like unlock upgrades to your character as you play. You only unlock so many per race, and when you go back and redo the races, you don't unlock more upgrades. You only do it for like getting the bronze, the silver, or the gold medal, or the platinum maybe. I can't remember. Whatever the case, 1, 2, or 3 stars. And that gives you the points you need to upgrade your character, so you're kind of like building your character over time, but in a limited capacity. Also, I should mention that there's a show-off mode where you do the track solo and you just kind of like try to rack up the highest score you can doing different tricks. And it's a lot of fun, but sometimes it's really frustrating. I have a really hard time in this game grinding the rails, and I never truthfully got the hang of it. Like if I hit the rail and landed on it, I was okay, but like jumping up onto the rail was really tricky. And the jumping in this took me a while to figure out. You don't just press a button to jump. You like hold the button down to squat down, and then the longer you do that, when you let go of the button, you push off from the ground, and that's how you jump. And it took me like half an hour to figure out that's what you're doing. I just kept wrecking over and over and over again when I first started. I will say that this is one of those racing games where everyone is constantly like crashing and running into each other all the flipping time. It keeps the game hectic and exciting, but it took a long time to feel like I really got into the flow of the game, and it's also really annoying when like, I guess they call it Mario Kart, it's like rubber banding. Like you can be blowing everybody out of the water and you should be half a course ahead of them, but the game, like when you crash, instead of it starting you where you are, it sort of puts you where everyone else is. So you stay in the action all the time, and it's really annoying when, like I said, you get out in front and like the dudes behind you wreck and then they just appear next to you. So it can get really tenuous there on some of the harder levels where you're trying to win the race, you know, and the people are always around you all the time. You can't really get that good lead on them. Like I said, all the tracks are really insane with tons of like switchback turns and secrets and gimmicks, and the game never ever got boring. I would say this really is the best snowboarding game I've ever played, even if it took a while to get the hang of it, and even if there are like some, you know, idiosyncrasies that make it a little frustrating here and there, still amazing. So I beat SSX Tricky on the career mode, finished all the races, and I think almost fully upgraded my character and unlocked most of the tricks in the game. I didn't finish it all doing the trick mode where you're just doing tricks. I had a hard time beating one of the levels. I couldn't get the rail grinding score up high enough. I just couldn't figure it out. But I had a good time and I spent a lot of time with this game. It's an 8 out of 10. A great game, fantastic. I recommend it. If you like snowboarding games, you've probably already played this, but if you haven't, you should definitely dive into it. And I'm really excited to try out the rest of the series. I think I have them all. Up next, we have a JRPG from a beloved franchise that actually isn't even part of the flippin' franchise. It's just rebranded for the West. And that game is Final Fantasy Legend 3 on the original Game Boy. And yes, I have it boxed. So this is actually the third game in the Saga series. I reviewed Final Fantasy Legend 2, which is the second game in the Saga series, earlier on this channel, and I have to say I wasn't the biggest fan of it. Luckily, this game does away with a lot of the strange leveling up mechanics and weapon breaking mechanics from the game and replaces them with like the standard mechanics you would expect in a JRPG. Breaking the norm of the time, this has a sci-fi setting, and you have to jump from the past back to the present and to the future to advance this like freaking 30-hour long story, like it's really long for a portable JRPG. So you can play as either a human or a mutant, and humans level up using like XP while mutants level up from, I guess, using their skills. You can also be a robot or a monster, and these are all like the classes, quote unquote. And they're standard in the Saga series. I think they've all had that of the 3 I've played, and I've played all 3 of the Final Fantasy Legend games now. And the way they work these classes and the way they level up and stuff, it's kind of counterintuitive. And if you don't read the manual about how they're going to work, you're going to be very, very confused. I don't have the manual. Mine's just boxed, but I did look it up on GameFAQs, and I was like, yeah, I wouldn't have figured that out. I did kind of remember how it worked from Saga 2, but not enough to actually do anything worthwhile. But outside of those like weird leveling up mechanics, this is just like a standard 8-bit RPG. It's what you would expect. The graphics are nice, but they look like pretty much any other 8-bit RPG. A lot of people claim they're really good, but they just look normal to me. I mean, it's a Game Boy game. The music's pretty decent, and it's one of the standout features of the game. I really liked it a lot. It's super catchy, and I believe the music in Final Fantasy Legend 2 was pretty catchy as well, so whoever the composer was on those kind of knocked it out of the park for sure. I really like how they toned down all the leveling up nonsense from the second game this time around. You just level up like normal. You just gain XP and, you get stronger over time. In the second game, it was done at like random intervals, and you might gain 5 levels in 10 minutes, or it might take you 3 hours to level up once. It was awful and really frustrating. And when you would set aside like an hour to grind, you never knew how much progress you would make. Luckily, that doesn't happen here, and everything just goes smoothly. But I freaking hate how the overworld map is like so maze-like. You can fly from these different islands and jump to multiple time points and travel under the sea, and it gives too many options for exploration, which I really don't like. I know some people love that. Not me. I don't want to do it. I want more of a direct route, or at least in a map I can reference. There's also a really high encounter rate in this, and a pretty sturdy difficulty, I would describe. And it makes the game feel like kind of overly grindy and boring at times. You have to jump to different time points to like solve these puzzles. There'll be like a tree blocking your way, so you have to like go back to where you were and travel back in time to the tree when it's a sapling and like set it on fire so that when you travel back to the future, it's dead and you can pass through that mountain pass or whatever you're doing. And I really don't like having to travel back. Like you spend all this time traversing this map to get where you're trying to go, and then you're blocked, and then you have to like retraverse all this crap you went through to go back in time, and then like traverse it back to the same location to do the thing, then traverse all the way back, travel back to the future, and then traverse all the way to it. It's like 5 trips to do one thing. And I felt like I was doing that all the time, and that's probably why this freaking game takes 30 hours to beat. Like, it's just that crap's so bloated. They should have given you like some sort of time machine on your person so you could just teleport back in time right at that exact location. That would have made more sense and would have been more fun. Like I said, I've played all the Final Fantasy Legend games now on the Game Boy, and I didn't really like or honestly even finish any of them. I got tired of all of them. While this one's more of a standard RPG than the second entry, I found it pretty tedious, like I said, and it basically put me to sleep every time I tried to play it. I'm glad to be done with it, and honestly, I'm glad to be done with the Final Fantasy Legend series. I like Final Fantasy a lot. I'm a big fan of that series, but this isn't Final Fantasy. This is the Saga series. So I'm really glad to be done with that. And no, I'm not going to be buying the Saga collection on the Switch. So like I said, I put about 5 or 6 hours into this, and I was just bored of it. I probably in that 5 or 6 hours spent 3.5 of it grinding. That's bad right at the beginning of the game, and most of that was just wandering around and getting into combat counters. I feel like I only finished the first 3 dungeons or so in the game. So I didn't have it in me to continue it, guys. Final Fantasy Legend 3 on the Game Boy is like a 6 out of 10. It's fine. It's okay. It's decent enough if you have the patience for that sort of thing. But me in this modern day, I just don't have it anymore. I've played hundreds of RPGs, and this one just didn't do it for me. okay? I'm sorry. But if you love that sort of stuff, from what everybody says, this is a really good one to try. So maybe you should try it out. You don't have to listen to me. You should, you don't have to. Up next is a game I played on this channel. I did 2 videos where I played this game and talked about it. And it's Gradius Gaiden, and I played it on the Gradius Collection on the PSP. So Gradius Gaiden came out on the PlayStation 1, and it is considered to be like a standout as a console shmup for the time. Everybody was just making arcade stuff, and to put something this high quality on a console was unheard of. And I believe it was a Japanese exclusive before being included on this compilation, which luckily got released in the United States. Gradius Gaiden takes place over like some really lengthy stages, 9 of them to be specific, and it's a bit too long for my taste, I have to say. But it was probably a welcome addition for like PS owners at the time. They probably ate that up, especially if they only had a game or 2 to play. And it works and plays like all the other arcade Gradius games, but now you can select from 4 ships and adjust the order of your power-ups to suit your playstyle. And if you've never played a Gradius game before, there's an abundance of freaking power-ups, and they move this cursor along the bottom or the top of the screen. I can't remember where it is. Each of those spots on that little cursor or in that grid signifies a different power-up. And when you pick up a power-up and it rotates to the spot you want, you hit the activate button and it upgrades that specific power-up. So the first one's like speed, the second one is your missiles, and then it's like your lasers and your shield and your options, things like that. So you can kind of like decide how you want to build your upgrades, but truthfully in most Gradius games you like get fully upgraded middle of like the first stage, and then the goal is to freaking stay powered up all the time and never die. Never once. Because it leads to what we call Gradius syndrome. It is super present in this, just like it is in every other Gradius game. And in case you don't know, Gradius syndrome is when you die in a shoot 'em up, you lose all your power-ups and the game is like balanced around you being fully powered up and you just can't continue. So you just basically have to start the whole game over. And that is present here, but it's not nearly as bad as it usually is, because getting to select that order of your power-ups really helps. You can put your shield right up front, and that'll allow you to take a couple of extra hits so you have time to gather more of the power-ups and get, up to a level that's feasible for continuing through the game. Another thing you end up doing in Gradius is getting fully powered up and then making that little cursor sit on the shield upgrade. So what'll happen is you'll take 3 hits with your shield or whatever, you'll lose it, and then it'll become available again. And if your cursor is currently sitting on that spot, you can reselect it and get another shield. So basically you're trying to stay on that all the time. And there's so many upgrades in this, or these little upgrade icons, that a lot of playing Gradius is just freaking avoiding them so you don't rotate the cursor past your shield upgrade. But the thing that's most annoying about this, and this is usually the case of a lot of like horizontal shmups, is that the biggest threats aren't the enemies and their bullets, it's the freaking environmental hazards. It's just like accidentally bumping into the ceiling or some crap falling down from the ceiling that you run into that you wouldn't know was going to be there unless you've played the stage like a million times and memorized every single little thing that can happen. And they can get really tiring. I tend to like shoot 'em ups that are more based around my reflexes rather than memorizing exactly what's going to happen and being where it's not happening, right? And like I said, another downside is like most Gradius games, it just recycles a lot of ideas and stages that we've seen before. Like the Moai heads are in every Gradius game, and you're always gonna run by a sun that shoots out like some sort of phoenix dragon or something. It's in like every game. And I know people get excited because they're like, oh, I recognize that, but I just want something new, to tell you the truth. It does have some amazing set pieces and memorable levels. I'm not gonna say it doesn't, but like with 9 stages, and I bet like more than half the content really being recycled, it can get a little boring. And really, truthfully, this whole game is just like unbearably difficult and unforgiving, even on the easiest setting. And I could forgive that if the game was super fun, but honestly, it just feels kind of bloated and overly long. I know it's supposed to be one of like the best Gradius games, but I just wasn't feeling it. And it wasn't fun enough for me to get like the 1 credit clear. Yes, I did beat it, but I had to use like several of my continues, and I just never was able to get good, as they would say, and 1 credit clear this. I know I could have done it, but I don't want to put in the time because I was ready to move on. So honestly, I hate to say it, I love shoot 'em ups and I really like Gradius, but Gradius Gaiden, despite the fact that everybody says it's like one of the best Gradius games ever, and it's on the Shmups Forum, like top 25 best shmups of all time list, I just felt like it was a 6 out of 10. I just thought it was kind of like okay. Like better than mediocre, but not a standout in any way. There are other Gradius games I like a lot better. Most Gradius games I like better. So if you're a huge Gradius fan, you might love this one. But personally, I was just kind of like done with it. And I put some time into it. So this isn't one I'll probably be coming back to. And I'm glad to be done with all the Gradius games on the Gradius compilation here on the PSP, because I do not like playing shoot 'em ups on the PSP. The D-pad is not great, and plugging it into your CRT, if you've never plugged your PSP into a TV before, it's shown on a little tiny screen in the middle of your screen. So there's a huge black board around it, and I feel like I have to sit like 2 feet in front of the TV to be able to see what's happening. If you watch the videos of me playing this game, you'll see my frustrations with it, and you'll get to hear me complain about having to sit too close to the TV. Up next, we have a reimagining of a classic arcade game. This came out on the PlayStation 2. I didn't even know it existed, despite the fact that I owned it, and it was in my backlog, but it got picked for me randomly, so we played it. It's Defender. So this came out in 2002, and it's just like I said, a modern take on the classic arcade game that came out, I guess, in the early 80s? There is a story here, and they have really tried to emphasize this story with an abundance of cutscenes and tons of text and lore and all kinds of other crap to flesh it out. Apparently, giant praying mantises are kidnapping everyone on Mars and destroying stuff and generally just like wreaking havoc everywhere. And their antics are like spreading throughout the solar system, and basically it's up to you to stop them. So you fly around like in Star Fox, but instead of being on rails, you're in these open 3D environments. And basically you're tasked with just performing these various objectives like escorting ships and destroying stuff and rescuing colonists and all those sort of things. And of course you earn points for completing these objectives that you use to upgrade your ship and buy extra lives between the missions. There are these temporary power-ups you can get that are scattered around the stage, and you're going to need them because there are a ton of freaking enemies everywhere in these stages. It's actually absolutely insane how many there are, and I feel like I would just kill them non-stop and they never stopped coming. I don't know if there's a set number of enemies per stage, but it sure doesn't feel like there are. It feels like they're just infinite. The game looks pretty good for a PS2 game, but it's nothing to write home about it, and it has that like dingy kind of gray and dark look to it. And on my CRT TV, which is pretty bright, it looked rather washed out, I have to say. I do like that there are a lot of different ships and different upgrades to unlock, but really, with the number of enemies that are floating around, I felt like it was better just to go with the ship that had the most defense, because you're being just bombarded non-stop with enemies flying around and shooting at you all the time. And speaking of like the tons of enemies, they all have like really annoying patterns. And they're so hard to hit unless you're using like a lock-on with homing missiles. And even then they take about like 2 or sometimes even 5 or more hits like directly to them to destroy them. And these are just basic enemies. These aren't like mid-bosses or anything like that, just your normal enemies. And I have to say, playing this game was really stressful for me. And the objectives I felt like just weren't that fun. Every stage it felt like had an escort mission, and everybody hates escort missions. Yeah, it's a cool idea to bring Defender into like 3D, but it got old really quickly. Even though I picked the ship that was like the burliest and strongest and had the most defense, it and even all the other ones felt really underpowered, and they really want you to like farm the same stages over and over and over again to get extra lives and upgrade your firepower. And the whole package just really isn't fun enough to warrant doing that. I made it about like 45 or 50% of the way through the game before I realized I just wasn't having fun, and it felt really grindy. I was trying to think of the best way to describe Defender on the PlayStation 2, and this is what popped into my head. And it was like, remember when you were a kid and you only had $20 to spend on a video game and you're at a store and you're just browsing through all the games, just trying to find something that like looks halfway decent that you could afford, this is one of those games. This is the game you buy in that situation. Like, you got $20 left over from your birthday money. You just really want a new game because you've played all the same ones 50,000 times. And like, this looked okay. And it was $20. Like, that's what you got, right? So Defender on the PS2 is not a great game. Yeah, it's more advanced than the arcade game of Defender, but the arcade game of Defender is a lot more fun. Obviously, it's a classic for a reason. So this guy right here, he's a 5 out of 10. Pretty mediocre. I would not recommend it. This probably wasn't even worth like $20. 20 years ago, I paid probably $1 or $2 for it. And I'm not even sure it was worth that. All right, we're to our last game. It's an arcade game from SNK, and I played it on the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection. And that game is Paddle Mania. So what is this game? Obviously you can see what this game is. You're watching the footage. Hopefully you're watching the footage. It's a tennis game. And I say tennis in air quotes because it more closely resembles like air hockey. You swing your racket with the right analog stick and the ball goes based on how late or how early you swing. Kind of like in a baseball game when you're up to bat. Really, you're just trying to get the ball past your opponent in most of the stages. Sometimes there are different objectives, but in general it's like who scores the most points wins. And a lot of times your opponents are just like ruthless. You can never knock the ball by them. So what you have to do is you have to hit them enough times to knock them down, which is like your only opportunity to score. And of course, they'll do the same to you all the time. And there's this like strict, and I mean strict timer, and whoever has the most points when it runs out wins. Unfortunately, if you tie with your opponent, they win. Like, it's like blackjack rules in a casino. Like, the house has the advantage on a tie. The game obviously isn't much to look at, and the music's pretty forgettable, which isn't unheard of for an early SNK game. I believe this game came out in 1988. That was pretty early in SNK's life. I think maybe they were 10 years old around that time or so. And I love SNK, but I just kind of hate the way this game feels. After you score, the ball will like often appear directly in front of your opponent, and they ace the ball like right by you, like in 1 microsecond before you can even react. It's unfair. Whereas after they score, you have to slowly walk across the court to like where the ball is and then serve it to them. And really the problem with this game is that the enemies hit the ball at you faster than you can react and really aim your swing. Especially the surfer level, where they just like throw unlimited balls at you faster than you can hit them. You only score by like knocking them off their surfboards. And since there's no time to aim, it's just like button mashing and hoping you get lucky. And like, this is an arcade game, so it was designed for you to pump in quarters over and over and over and over again. Luckily in this version, you don't have to do that, and there's a rewind feature. I did not realize there was a rewind feature on the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection. This is the first game I've ever played on it, till I made it to like, I think stage 6 of 9, and I was able to get up to the surfers, but the first time I played them, they beat me something like 38-0, or 38-5 or something like that. After I found out there was the rewind feature, I was able to beat the game, which was nice. Like I said, I beat Paddle Mania on the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection. It was fine. I had an okay time with it. It's really difficult and unfair, and it's unbalanced. But the rewind feature and being able to pump in unlimited credits, you know, you can get through it if you try hard enough. But it's, to like 1 credit clear it, I mean, that seems like almost an impossible feat. I'm sure somebody's done it out there somewhere, but this guy didn't. Definitely not. I spent a few hours with it, maybe 2 or 3 hours, and I had an okay time with it. I would say Paddle Mania on this collection is about a 6 out of 10. It's good. It's okay. It's worth a playthrough or two just to try it out, especially if you can get to that surfer level. That is something else, believe me. The volleyball level's interesting too. Well guys, there's 6 more games that are picked for me to play randomly. Really like 5 with the 1 gold star game that I got to pick. I know it's been a long time since I've done one of these videos. I love these videos. These are my favorite videos to do on the channel because, like I said, I'm RNG gamer. I'm not just RNG collector. I play these games. But I've had a lot of other videos come out recently. You know, I had my 1-year anniversary video come out, and then I had this collaboration I did, and then I went to a game convention, had a couple of videos come out with that. So this one got put on the back burner. So we finished 6 games here, but honestly, I finished like enough to do another one of these videos already. So that should be coming out sooner than later. If you made it this far into the video, I really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed already and you like the content, please do that and like the video and leave me a comment. Like I said, I answer every one of them. And if you really want to help out the channel, consider becoming a channel member by clicking join down below. You can get your name at the end of the video, just like you see these fine people on this screen right now. You can sponsor part of a video or pick a game from my backlog if you'd like to do that. There's lots of different options. And if it's too hard for you to click join down below, or you don't want to give your credit card to YouTube, you can do it on Patreon as well. I have a Patreon campaign going on there, and it works just the same. So once again, guys, I appreciate all the support, and I'll catch you next time.